What's up, guys? Before we get into the video today, I just want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, and that is Thrive Fantasy. Come prop up on Thrive Fantasy this season. Thrive Fantasy is a daily fantasy sports app for player props. All you have to do is choose 10 out of the 20 player prop options to build your lineup. Use promo code HIVE, that is HIVE, when you sign up today, and you will receive an instant $20 bonus on your first deposit of $20 or more. Download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store or the Play Store, or by visiting their website, www.thrivefantasy.com. Sign up and prop up today. What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Niners News here on 49ers Hive. My name is Zach Hernandez, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Matt Llewellyn. And today we're going to be talking about the 49ers 53-man roster and also the practice squad. Matt, first things first, what stood out to you the most?
How thin they are at corner. They kept 5 on the roster, including perennially injured Jason Verrett, who has looked really good, but then again had like a grade 1 hamstring issue late in the camp. So you've seen last year's I believe the 5th or 6th round pick Tim Harris got put onto waivers, and it's just at some point it's a very thin room, I think. And they're a Jason Verrett injury away from calling up a Dante Johnson or bringing Tim Harris back. So they do have options, but you got Richard Sherman, who's not getting any younger. You got Ahkello Witherspoon, who is super inconsistent. And then you have Emmanuel Mosley, who, with some tape on him, let's see if he grows or not. We don't know enough. And I just think that, the room is just a little bit empty, if you will. And, any key injury, especially when you're talking about early season games when they're trying to build up all these calluses and, take hits and put hits on people. And, you never know if somebody's going to go down. And, I thought it was a little bit of a missed opportunity that they didn't go out and sign someone like Logan Ryan, who was on the free agent market for forever and a day. He only got signed a few days ago. So, there were things they could have done. It's not for me to, second guess the team, but if there's one surprising area, it's the choices that they made in the defensive backfield.
Yeah, it was interesting to see how they continuously addressed their wide receiver position throughout the offseason, even if it was just camp bodies, but they really didn't seem to care to add any defensive backs. They did add Cyprian as a safety, but as far as the corner position, like you just addressed, they kind of felt comfortable apparently standing pat on where they were. And then that report came out from Matt Barrows that they were looking into trading Ahkello, and then John Lynch came out and said that's not true. So there's just a lot that's up in the air with the 49ers secondary. But for me, I think what stood out the most, 2 things. Number one, which we all knew, they're going into the year again, with 3 quarterbacks yet again, which isn't really common. It might be more of a common thing this year because of COVID. But normally that's not really a thing, but Kyle Shanahan just has that love for CJ that he just can't let him go. And number 2, go ahead. Do you have to say something?
Yeah, it's a weird thing too, because it's like CJ's not even second on the depth chart. If something, heaven forbid, if Jimmy's not out there, then it's going to be Nick Mullins, and then you kind of, it's not even like CJ goes out there and holds kicks. He literally just does nothing. I don't know. I mean, maybe he hands out Gatorade to the players, the real players. I mean, at this point, he's a glorified, equipment manager. So, yeah, I don't get it. And, I know the COVID's a thing, but a lot of the other teams around the league are only carrying 2 quarterbacks. So, it's a little bit of a mystery to me why they chose to keep 3. Especially when you've seen, we know what CJ Beathard is at this point, and he's not it.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. He's got some sort of commitment to him. And obviously this is completely separate from CJ as a person. We're just speaking strictly as a football player. Right. It doesn't make sense to keep him on the roster. That spot could have gone to somebody like a Jonathan Cyprian, a veteran, a guy who could bring some, much needed leadership and knowledge to the 49ers secondary. But also another thing that stood out to me, I thought was the wide receiver position. After all that fuss of signing veteran after veteran after veteran, although they may have just been camp bodies, they went with the 6 guys that we all thought they were going to go with. Ayuk, the rookie, Kendrick Bourne, Richie James, Dante Pettis, Deebo Samuel, and Trent Taylor. I think the only surprise, quote unquote, would be Richie James, because there's a lot of speculation that his roster spot was up in the air and a younger guy or a veteran could come in and take it from him. But that didn't really seem to happen. So there aren't too many changes other than the addition of Ayuk to this 49ers wide receiver group. So they must feel comfortable going into it. I know Lynch recently said, that they are very comfortable at the depth they have at the position, despite the recent injuries. So look, they're really banking on Debo coming back healthy and this not being a serious injury for the rookie Brandon Ayuk. Because if those two things don't pan out quite like they're hoping or that they're planning on, they could have some issue on their starting wide receivers. That's something to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, I agree. And as far as Richie James go, I think it turned into a situation where the devil is better than the devil you don't, and that he's familiar with the system, and rather than bringing a new guy who you maybe get marginally better production out of, as far as maybe kick returns or something like that, they'd have to learn the system, which kind of just makes that a wash. If you get better production on somebody who doesn't know the system, I mean, as far as the other guys, I mean, it's Trent Taylor with the rest of this offense, it's going to look interesting. Everybody says that Dante Pettis has a bug up his ass this year, and he's looking better, so that's going to be interesting. Obviously, Ayuk is going to be extremely intriguing, just from that Shanahan said that he thought he was the best wide receiver in the draft. So coming from Shanahan, that's saying something, and that kind of makes me excited for what they're gonna trot out for him as far as scheme wise. Debo, again, we're gonna find out soon here whether or not he's gonna be back for week 1. My guess is probably not, maybe an extra week or two. But if they get him out there, then that's again another guy. And then Kendrick Bourne working hard in the offseason. It's an interesting group, that's for sure. And it is kind of a little bit of a surprise that they went with the stock guys, because it seemed like they tried to sign these guys. They drafted Juwan Jennings, who ended up getting cut. You see them making all these moves, and it's just the same core guys that they had. I think that the group looks different because of more experience. And again, you're getting a guy like Taylor back from injury. So that'll be really interesting. The last area, though, and this kind of coincides with the wide receivers, is that they're carrying 4 tight ends, which is pretty interesting. So, I mean, Kittle obviously is a given. Jordan Reed, you don't know what you're going to get out of him. Maybe he gets hurt or something. But then you have Ross Dwelly, who came up in big spots last year, and then they drafted Charlie Warner this year. So they're investing heavily in the tight end spot. I think that's a good move. I really think that Shanahan's offense does a great job of, when you're passing between the numbers, you're opening up the edge for the running that Kyle likes to do. And I saw somebody on Twitter say that, it was sad that the 49ers only had XYZ amount of broken tackles or whatever. But it's like when Mostert and last year Breida, when you're running by everybody and you're not getting tackled, broken tackles don't really mean a lot. They were number 2 in the NFL in rushing. But I think a lot of that goes to the fact that the 49ers do a lot of damage in the passing game in between the numbers, which, again, sucks a lot of those defenders inside, so that way they can run to the outside. So they kind of complement each other. And I think that carrying 4 tight ends, especially tight ends that can block, are mean and nasty, and still have the ability to get out in space and work with the ball, I think that's critical for the offense.
I'm so glad you touched on that, because that was going to be my next question is, what did you think of them carrying 4 tight ends? George Kittle seems to be ecstatic about it. He was saying, he wants to see them run a lot of sets with multiple tight ends out there. And people are already hyping this setup as this unit as a great unit that has great potential. Jordan Reed and George Kittle, 2 very, very talented tight ends. Obviously, we all know Jordan Reed's injury history. There's a big asterisk on him as to if he pans out for the 49ers. But there's a big risk reward there for them. And I think the reward is much greater than the risk, because if it doesn't work out, hey, all right, you tried. Let's see what the young guy, Charlie Warner, or even Ross Dwelly, we already kind of know what we have in him. So it's not too big of a drop off from Reed to a guy like Dwelly or Warner. But if it pans out, then the 49ers are looking at a very, very dynamic duo of tight ends, which reminds me of Vernon Davis and Delanie Walker, where it's just, pick your poison type with both of these guys. And, I was reading reports saying that Jordan Reed was pretty much unstoppable when he was practicing with the 49ers. I know it took him a while to actually get to start practicing, but once he did, he was beating double teams. He was, fighting through physical contact, whatever it needed to be done to catch the ball. So I'm actually really excited to see what he can bring. So last question for you, Matt. Solomon Thomas moved inside. How is that going to pan out for the 49ers defensive line?
He'll be a rotation guy. We know what Solomon Thomas is, and listen, he can say I'm in the best. They always say they're in the best shape of their life. He's added weight. He's doing this and that. He earned his money inside. I got to see it to believe it at this point. That Solomon Thomas has been such an underachiever and a disappointment for where he was picked. That at this point, expectations are so low that if he does anything other than screw the pooch, I'll be surprised. And I'm not, that's not. I'm sure Solomon's a nice guy, but I didn't like the pick when he came out. I thought his hands were small and he had a hard time finishing, and that's proved true in the NFL. He doesn't finish plays. People get away from him, and it's not that he's, not a hard worker. I'm sure he is a really hard worker. It's just sometimes there's a big difference between Pac-12 football and the NFL, and that's just, at this point, we know what he is, and if he can be a rotational contributor, then so be it. Honestly, for me, I'm more excited about Kentavious Street. Somebody like that. So, somebody who wasn't a first-round pick, but who is looking like a beast, So that, to me, is the more interesting aspect of it. Solomon Thomas, I'm pretty sure this is going to be his last season in San Francisco.
Wow. All right. Yeah, baby Hulk there in Kentavious Street. Yeah, it's unfortunate when a guy drafted as high as Solly was. We're talking about lofty aspirations as a rotational player. I think that kind of speaks to how it panned out for the 49ers. They had that Stanford class together though, Matt. So, you got to love it. What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Niners News here on 49ers Hive. My name is Zach Hernandez. I am joined by my co-host, Matt Llewellyn. And today we're going to be bringing you a Deebo Samuel injury update. Matt, what's the latest on this?
Well, they're supposed to have a summit Tuesday. We're recording this Monday, so tomorrow they're going to have a summit. And they're going to do a bone scan. They're meeting with the doctor who did the surgery and a doctor from the NFL. And they're going to take a look and see if he's ready to go. So depending on how that goes is going to inform the team moving forward on whether or not he's going to play week 1 or if they're going to hold him back a little bit longer.
Yeah, I read that too, with the Dr. Anderson, the guy who did the surgery. And from what John Lynch was saying, he's kind of sounding optimistic. The quote here, he does have a shot at playing week 1. Tuesday morning, they'll have the meeting and the trading staff will take the latest look at the scans and whatnot to see exactly where he's at. I can tell you that Deebo has done a fantastic job. I'm a huge believer that if you get injured and you're already in great shape, that you tend to heal quicker. We're hopeful, but I don't have an answer because we don't know yet. So John Lynch seems to be pretty optimistic about it, at least from the sound of that quote. But it is also a type of thing where it's like, do you want to rush your number 1 receiver back from that type of injury to play week 1? And although it is a division game, it's not the most important game. So it is a chance that they could, even if he was ready, hold him back for another week. Or do you think I'm kind of overestimating this injury?
No, I don't think that at all. I think it's actually kind of weird that they're going the Tuesday before the game to get a scan done. You would have thought that they would have been more up to date on it beforehand. I think Tuesday is a little late. How much work has he done as far as staying? It's one thing to be like, oh, well, he's in good shape when he got injured, but then with the Jones fracture, there's a lot of time where you're not walking around, where you're not doing these cuts. And I know we've seen the video of him training on the soft mat. But at the same time, he's not out there in cleats again, making cut on grass, which is a forgiving surface. It's not like it's concrete, but it's also going to be much more taxing on that foot than it otherwise would be. Maybe he does play week 1. I think that they're probably going to save him. For me, this is just my mind going. I would save him till week 4. You got the back-to-back games in New York against the Giants and the Jets, and you're going to be staying. I think they're staying in Virginia or something like that. Maybe not ideal to have him back, but we'll see what happens. My guess is that he's probably going to play week 1 just because they're making it sound like he's going to. How much he's going to play, that's going to be another thing altogether. But, with the foot injury, the worst thing that can happen is you rush it back too fast and then he gets injured again, and then he's out for even longer than before. So I guess that's why they're bringing all these people together. But to me, it's just kind of weird that it seems late in the game for that as far as his status for week 1.
Yeah, it is kind of, really, really close to the game. I mean, we're talking, 4 or 5 days away from kickoff, and it's still up in the air. And it seems like it's a major appointment as far as his status, to where it's not like it's like, oh, everything's good, it's just a last minute check. It's like, no, we're finding out a couple of days from now if he's going to be good to go. So I don't know. It seems kind of rushed to me. And I know Debo, even the day he got injured, when they were talking about the timeline of how long he'll be out, he was like, no. I'll be back week 1. Don't listen to any of this nonsense. And everybody was kind of like, look, everybody's going to say that, he's a dog. He's going to want to be out there as soon as his team's out there. But I don't know. For me personally, I didn't really take, full stock of that. I'm like, yeah, sure, But it seems like he really is trying to get there, regardless on if that's the best decision or not for his own health. And I feel like you tend to see that with players that have that really, really strong, ambition and high levels to want to play this game with their teammates. They might rush themselves back a little quicker than they should have. And then, like you said, it ends up with a more serious injury that could have been prevented. So hopefully that's not the case with Debo, because we'd obviously hate for this to turn into something more that could have been prevented. Now, Matt, if he is not able to go, how confident are you in the 49ers wide receiver group after him?
I mean, there's a bunch of question marks. I think he's the most established, and even he has some, thing. He got off to a relatively slow start last year, really poured it on in the last 8 games. So the 49ers have been bitten by this before, though, where you see a promising rookie transition to to their second year and not do well. And I'm talking about Dante Pettis. Now, obviously, Debo has much more fire and grit than it seems Dante Pettis does, but they call it a sophomore slump for a reason. It's happened enough that it's something to consider. You have Brandon Ayuk as a rookie, and even though Shanahan says he's further along than any rookie he's seen, he's still a rookie. I mean, that's going to be also in relativistic terms, and as far as Kendrick Bourne's comfort with the offense is going to be far more than Brandon Ayuk's, no matter how fast Brandon Ayuk has progressed. Kendrick Bourne is still a question mark. I mean, he worked hard all off season, but we know that he has those concentration drops at the most inopportune times, where it's like, 3rd and 11, and he has the first down, and it's just off his hands, for whatever reason. But then again, he comes back and makes a clutch play. So, who knows what's going to happen there. Trent Taylor, how effective is he going to be missing 2 years essentially with the foot? Who's to know? Jerick McKinnon, the running back. I mean, as a third down back, he's going to have a big role in the receiving core, because Shanahan's not afraid to put his running backs out on the edge and run them as wide receivers and have them run routes. So, there is a lot of question marks after Deebo Samuel, but I think taking care of Deebo's health is the most important thing. And that's why I said week 4, because when you look at the schedule, really, I mean, Arizona's going to be a tough matchup. Division games always are. But after that, the Giants and the Jets, I mean, those aren't exactly, Super Bowl contenders. So if you can hold him back, there's enough on this offense. His team should not lose to the Giants or the Jets, no matter if Deebo Samuel plays or not. So if you have the opportunity, to give him a little bit more rest to make sure that foot is fully healed, now week 4, you have that primetime game, and now you start getting into the heart of your season where you're going to need him. So, we'll see what happens. He's making it sound like he's playing week 1, but, there are other alternatives, and I think the 49ers would be okay without him for the first couple games.
Yeah, I would think, especially with how last season ended with the playoffs, they're more than comfortable leaning on their running game. I think they've made that clear. So it wouldn't really make too much sense to me to rush him back and risk further injuring it if they're able to just lean on Raheem Mostert and Jerick McKinnon and, Tevin Coleman, and then also have their tight end sets and, also Kendrick Bourne. Like you said, they have plenty of guys on offense to where it's not like if Debo isn't back Sunday, the 49ers, they're for sure going to lose. I don't think that's the case at all. So I would be with you on saying that he should sit out. I don't know if I would say all the way to week 4, but it does make sense. I mean, looking at the schedule, like you said, do the 49ers need Deebo Samuel to beat the Jets and the Giants? No. Not at all. I mean, they could probably play with Nick Mullins and beat those two teams. So I just think that as far as his well-being for the long term, he should hold himself back, and maybe the team, if Debo doesn't, should hold him back. But unfortunately, like we both said, we don't think that's going to be the case. I have a feeling if that doctor says on Tuesday morning he's good to go, the team's going to take that and write him off as he's good to go. He's in the starting lineup. Maybe they'll put him on a snap count. Who knows? But as far as it is right now, he's aiming to play. And I mean, I guess you got to respect the hustle, but hopefully he doesn't injure himself further. Today, we're going to be talking about 49ers that need to step it up in order to have success. For me, Matt, I'm going to go first on this one. And I think the answer is clear. I'm going to say Emmanuel Moseley. I know probably people are going to be typing in the comments, what about Akello? What about Akello? I don't want to quite say that I've written Akello off, but I do think Moseley has proven to be the better and at the very least more consistent cornerback of the two. I think Moseley has shown the 49ers what he can do when given the opportunity. And I know everybody's going to say, what about in the Super Bowl where he let his assignment go? And that's fair. But, show me a corner that hasn't had a mistake like that. He's young. He's still, learning the game, learning the system. I think this year he's going to be taking a big step. And I think the 49ers, obviously they didn't sign anybody. They didn't draft anybody. I think they're counting on him to take a big step. And it seems like, I don't know if I couldn't really tell from the training camp if they're saying, we want you to take this job, or if they're kind of asking Verrett or Kello, like, hey, come on, come take this job. But for me, I do think that Moseley is going to step it up. And I think the 49ers desperately need him to step it up. Who do you have, Matt?
I have Mike McGlinchey. It's year 3. It's time to put on your big boy pants and play up to that first round level. And he's been okay. I mean, I'm not going to say he was completely garbage, but he could do a lot better. And, his running mate, Joe Staley, has retired, replaced by just as big a monster in Trent Williams. So it's not like McGlinchey is lacking in education or a role model to look up to or somebody to pattern their game after. He's just had instances where, he'll let defenders in on him. He'll lose leverage. He'll stumble. He'll fall down. And he's got to clean that stuff up. I mean, are you going to be the right tackle of the future for this team? Or are you going to be a guy after, your year 4 or maybe year 5, if they pick up the option, that it's time to look for another replacement? I know he kind of switched positions. He was a left tackle at Notre Dame for the most part. And because Staley was here, obviously they moved him over to the right. But, again, it's year 3. This is put up or shut up time. The 49ers offensive line has a huge task in keeping Jimmy Garoppolo upright, who, again, is another important player to kind of, excel and have not a breakout year. I thought he had a good year last year, but to clean up some of the stuff that we saw. And, a lot of that stems from being able to keep him upright and being able to let him scan the field and have time in the pocket. And for me, I saw McGlinchey get beat bad a couple times last year on pass rushes. So he's got to clean that up. The interior line is kind of a mess right now. It's not healthy. It's one of those units that is going to take time to develop. So you need to have your anchors at the tackle position. So we already know Trent Williams is going to be a beast. I mean, he always has been. And now it's time for McGlinchey to show if he's going to be a beast or just another, first round washout.
Yeah, McGlinchey is interesting because he has the size, he's physical, but for some reason he was just getting, mauled at certain times, and other defensive linemen are going out there and kind of just giving him a sack lunch every day. So it's like, you got to step it up, man. Now was the time, like you said, Staley's not in the building anymore. You don't have your big brother figure. Now it's on you. So I think McGlinchey will stand up to the task, especially standing with Trent Williams, who's going to be able to show him the ropes, at least from maybe a different perspective than Joe Staley did. But I also would say another guy to keep an eye on that really needs to step it out, that might be feeling some pressure, and this might be an obvious answer, but Dante Pettis. And I don't think that it's quite hinging on him as much as the two guys that we previously said. But I do think the 49ers, they're counting on him to have a big year. The roster cuts just happened. They kept him on the roster. And I do think from everything, all the indications that I've seen from off-season camps, from what John Lynch has said, from what Kyle Shanahan has said, it looks like they're pretty excited about his season, at least going into it this year. He looks like he's packed on some weight. some muscle. He looks like he has a different mindset. And even I watched one of his press conferences, and he was even saying, you know, like, hey, everybody's saying I shouldn't even be here. So I have literally no expectations to go off of, and I'm just here to show what I can do. And he did say he was working through some personal things. He didn't care to go into them at the moment. But it seems like he has his mind right. And we've all said that's the biggest thing with Dante Pettis. He's got all the physical traits. It's just his mentality. So I would go with Mosley and Dante Pettis. I think more so Mosley needs to have success. I think Dante Pettis, you could argue, is more of a luxury. But if he has success, then the 49ers passing game is going to be working really, really well. Do you think that's more of a pipe dream?
No, I don't. And the one thing that really caught my attention when I watched Dante Pettis during the press conferences is that, like, blue hair crap, it's gone. You know, he's come in, you know, all the extra stuff on top, you know, the dyed hair and whatever, that's gone. And you see a kid who maybe for the first time is realizing, like, oh, this is a grown man's game and grown men have to play it. So, you know, I got to put all the other stuff aside. And he said that, you know, Coach Shanahan was hard on him and he took it the wrong way and he had to learn how to let that go. So hopefully that is true. And he can contribute to this team and help the offense out, because having Dante Pettis, who we had so much promise for, I mean, he was a second-round pick. So, you know, if he can recapture that magic we saw at the end of his first year, that's a boon for the 49ers. The last person that I think is critical and needs to improve for the 49ers to go back to and win a Super Bowl this year isn't a player. It's Kyle Shanahan. And for me, he needs to do what got him to the dance, do what gets you to the Super Bowl, and then stop out coaching yourself. You're coaching yourself in circles so that in the last 5 minutes of the game or whatever, you've coughed up 2 leads in the Super Bowl. Your offense is just stalled. He's gotten into his own head. He tries to get cute with stuff. I mean, the Super Bowl this year was an example. You know, Deebo Samuel was all over the field in the first half and then disappeared in the second half. He was nowhere to be found. They went away from what was working and what got them the lead. And when the offense stalled and couldn't sustain drives, then you saw the defense start to come apart. And I think a lot of that is Kyle gets in his own head and he's saying, like, well, they've seen that, so I need to do something else. Instead of, well, they've seen that, they can't stop it, so until they do, I'm just going to keep doing it. Which is what he did against Minnesota and what he did against Green Bay. All he did was pound the rock, and they couldn't stop it. So he kept running the ball. You know, and in the Super Bowl, for whatever reason, he went away from the stuff that was working. And that's what cost them, in my opinion, that's what cost them the game, because the offense could not sustain drives anymore. He was calling plays that were a little off kilter and looked like he was trying to get too cute, and he was playing to not lose rather than to win. And it cost them big. So for the 49ers to really get back to the Super Bowl and win it, Kyle's going to have to, you know, evaluate himself for once rather than just players, and realize, and he will, because he's tough on himself. He's harder on himself than anybody's going to be, but he's had two chances at getting a ring, and both times he's come up short in really weird ways. So you don't want him to get to the point where that stigma is attached to him, and that even gets more inside his head where it's like, oh my God, is this happening again? So, you know, Kyle has to really look at it and just, whatever got you there, keep doing it. It's working. So for me, you know, Kyle Shanahan is critical for this 49ers team to actually take home the Lombardi Trophy this year.
I'm so glad you said that, because I thought about that, but I'm like, no, I'll keep it to players. But it's completely true. And you know, some fans, some viewers may be upset listening to that. But look, here at 49ers Hive, we're not going to give you unfiltered praise for the team. We're going to try and tell it like it is, and that's exactly how it is. Kyle Shanahan outcoaches himself. He gets into mind games with himself. He makes things way more difficult than they need to be sometimes. And I'm so glad you brought up going away from what worked, because just like you said, Minnesota, Green Bay, they couldn't stop the run. They literally asked him, why did you keep running the ball? Why did Jimmy only pass it so many times? Well, they couldn't stop it. Why would I get away from it? And then flash forward a couple of weeks, and then he gets away from it. It's like, dude, they couldn't stop it. Deebo was going all over the place, like you said, on these end arounds. And he stopped. He stopped doing it for whatever reason. And I totally agree. It cost the 49ers a ring. And I know they'll never say it, but I would pay an unlimited amount of money to hear what the actual players think and what they have to say about it, because they were in prime position to win this game. And I know you may make the argument that they were just as fault, and that may be true, but had some calls been called differently, had some plays been drawn differently, who knows how that would have turned out. So that's a great answer, Matt, because I do think Kyle Shanahan, he just needs to stick with what works. He has a fantastic offense, a fantastic team. He's built a great team here with the 49ers, and he just needs to use their skill sets to the best of their abilities instead of trying to fit a round peg in a square hole, because it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. So, great answer. I really do like that.